Hello and welcome to Mama Juice. Today we have Stacey on, who is a licensed counselor, and we're going to talk about postpartum depression, anxiety, and even how men deal with the birth of a new baby. And then we kind of are going to go into a little bit of pandemic talk, so it's kind of a nice little mixture of it all, but let's do it. Well, welcome to Mama Juice. I'm really excited we finally got this done.
You're killing it with this podcast. I love it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, baby blues, and how the pandemic has affected all of it.
Yeah, a lot of P words. Postpartum, pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, say that real fast 10 times, right?
Right.
So I've noticed that a lot of moms don't really know what to look for, So part of my day job is when I ask moms, do you feel like you have symptoms of postpartum depression? I get a lot of pausing and then I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And it kind of surprises me that nobody's talking to moms about, what to look for. So what would you say is the best way to distinguish between I just had a baby and my hormones are crazy and there's a lot of changes and I'm overwhelmed and I should probably talk to my doctor about having postpartum depression or anxiety?
Mm-hmm. And you're so right that nobody really talks about it. We don't know what to look for. Also, loved ones don't know what to look for. Right. Beyond the 6-week checkup that moms have, there isn't really a lot of aftercare or like well visits for moms, to check in on that stuff. I remember when I had my first, I just showed up to my 6-week appointment and went about my business. And then when I had my second, he had me fill out a little 1-page form, the Edinburgh test for postpartum. And he was like, you failed your depression test. I'm like, I know. Mental health counselor. I know that. Right. So yeah, I don't think we're talking enough about it. I don't think people know what to look for. So most moms, I would say, when you have a baby, it's a shock to the system. There's trauma to the body. There's hormones raging. You have this tiny little human you have to care for. You're not sleeping. You were pregnant for 10 months, 9 months, and now you're not. It's a huge change. So there's going to be some response to that, some sadness, some fatigue, some anxiety. But when we're looking at distinguishing between baby blues and postpartum, the biggest thing we want to look for is intensity. How intense is it? Are you having thoughts that are like scaring you? Is it so much to where you can't get stuff done? Also, frequency. Is it all day? Is it every day? Is it for weeks and weeks? Length of time is really important too. And if it's interfering, can I care for my baby, or am I checked out and don't want to connect with my baby? Am I frustrated because the baby won't nap, or am I raging because the baby won't nap? And so there's some key distinctions there.
Yeah. And I think another thing is I didn't know postpartum anxiety existed. So I was looking for signs in myself of postpartum depression. Mm-hmm. And it took me probably a year to identify it. So I struggled with that anxiety for a full year before I went to my doctor and I said, something's not right. And for me, it was catastrophizing. So I pulled the blanket from under my son too fast when he was a newborn and his head kind of jerked to the side. In my mind, I almost killed him because his neck was about to snap and I'm the worst mother ever. And how could I do that? Mm-hmm. And so it literally, like you said, it took over that day because that's all I could think about, and I would picture these horrible things. And the fact that I couldn't recognize that wasn't a problem is like kind of strange to me.
Yeah, for sure. And so postpartum anxiety, in Stacey's opinion, is way more common because depression and anxiety are so closely related that sometimes we can't tell the difference. But, for me, I was hyper-focused and like Googling things and writing things down and researching things and tracking everything on an app and then making a spreadsheet about what the data on the app says and comparing. And it was like taking up my whole day. My husband would get home and I'd pass off the baby. And then instead of taking a nap or a shower or taking care of myself, I would go research more things and write things down. And so, like you, it was a long time before I realized that it was something that, needed to be looked at. And you go to the doctor for your 6th week and they say, oh, how's your body? Are you sleeping? How's the baby? Okay, you're good. And that's it.
Right.
Not enough.
Exactly. Yeah. So then outside of the OB, what would you suggest a mom to do if they say they're past their 6-week postpartum? They've been cleared by their doctor, but they're at 12 weeks, 18 weeks, and they're starting to feel like maybe something's not right. Like, who do they go to at that point?
I think it's important to just talk about it in general. So many times we don't want to ask for help because we want to be viewed as, mama's got it and this is a beautiful baby, you have nothing to be upset about, and nobody talks about it. So then you think you're the only one that's experiencing that. You probably thought you were the only one that hurt your baby with a blanket, right?
Exactly.
And so just being able to say out loud to your partner, or to friends, or to whomever that I'm not okay and I need help, that's huge right there. So many times I hear friends tell me they struggled and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew,
Right.
Plus, even if everything's healthy and going well, it's still hard. But then you add on all these extra pieces that are different for everyone, like what's their birth trauma? Is the baby eating? Is the baby gaining weight? Are you having trouble with breastfeeding? Do you have a partner that's helpful? Do you have to go back to work? I mean, there's so many other external things. And even if everything's going well, we still need help, and we have to admit that. We have to ask for it.
So I just had a thought about a mom I spoke to recently. And when I asked her if she's having signs or symptoms of postpartum depression, she seemed almost scared. And so I kind of, dug a little bit, and she said, I had a recent incident with DCS, and I'm afraid that if I go to my doctor and say I'm depressed, they're going to take my baby away.
Yeah.
And so can you speak on a little bit about how that works?
That's part of the stigma and why we don't talk about it, why we don't ask for help. We don't want to be viewed as a bad mom. We don't want to be judged. And I think, unfortunately, it's getting better now, but historically in the media, we only see bad cases, like the mom who drives her car into the river with her kids in it or drowns them in the bathtub. Those are super, super extreme cases. That's not common. And so we have this fear or this stigma that we're going to be lumped into that category. Also, depending on your status in society, I'm a mental health professional. I have a private practice. I see teens. I was afraid to see a therapist. I know all the therapists in town. I don't want people to know I'm struggling.
Right.
So that's why asking for help and getting the support of your loved ones and your partner can really help, because then they can kind of normalize it for you and help you understand, like, you're not alone. You're not the only one that experiences this. This is super, super common. So I would tell those moms who are afraid to seek support, start small, start with your partner, start with friends, start with other moms where you feel safer. And the more and more it's normalized, the easier it's going to be to then reach out for professional help.
Okay. And then, I know you can't give a blanket statement on this, but to my knowledge, just admitting that you're depressed is not going to be a reason for DCS to get involved.
Oh, absolutely. DCS is all about safety. So if you are going to hurt your child or hurt yourself, and it's somebody in your household or you are in imminent danger, then they intervene. Most of the time they intervene with getting resources and helping you, get some other caregivers to help you. It's pretty extreme that they remove a child, from the home, and doctors and professionals aren't going to call DCS if you say you're depressed. You could tell your therapist, I have these really strange thoughts. Like, I used to think about what happened if my baby fell in the toilet. And no, that's so silly to say out loud, but a professional isn't going to say, oh, well, you're unfit, because exactly. It's actually really normal to think that. Really normal.
Yeah. So you actually yourself thought that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm laughing now. My youngest is 2.5. Now it's silly, but so many worries go through your mind. Like, I'm not going to bring him to the bathroom because what if I drop him in the toilet and he drowns?
Right.
Totally. Yeah. So much sleep deprivation that happens in those early weeks. Like, I thought things were talking to me. I mean, you can't judge yourself based on how you felt in those early weeks.
Right. So how much does a lack of sleep affect one's mental health?
So much. 24 hours without any sleep is the equivalent of being under the influence. And most of us don't stay up a whole 24 hours, but when you're getting just patches of sleep here and patches of sleep there, it's not good sleep, especially if you're nursing a baby around the clock. I literally thought my pump was talking to me. I heard a voice in my breast pump because I had not slept in days.
Oh, yes. So, it's very common.
So that, plays a role too. Not only do you have hormones raging and you're trying to care for this little thing, but you haven't slept. And, you know, I remember my mother-in-law just saying, I will hold this baby for 20 minutes if you just go to sleep. And it worked. Like just being able to sleep just for 20 minutes helped so much.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I haven't slept a full night in 5.5 years.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a normal person all the time. I can tell when it's getting really bad. Like I actually contemplated maybe trying to leave work early today to go home and take a nap before the weekend.
Do it.
Because the thought of feeling like this and spending the weekends with my kids, I just don't know if I have it in me. So I think I need a nap before I can continue into my weekend.
Do it. We have to prioritize our own self-care. And the times when you do get an extra amount of sleep or you sleep a little bit later, we're almost like, what day is it? Like, I'm so confused. It feels like we've done something wrong because we slept too much.
Right. It's so funny because like I've always been a good sleeper. My mom's like, since you were born, you just love to sleep. And so I think it's kind of cruel of the world to give me 3 kids who don't sleep. But anyways, that's a whole other issue. And so, I mean, I used to sleep in. Like I was one of those people that I could sleep till 10, 11 o'clock in the afternoon. And like that was just normal for me on a weekend. My kids sleep in till 7:30, and I'm like doing backflips. I'm like, this is the best thing ever.
Right. Yeah. And by 10, you're like, what am I going to do with the rest of the day?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. And I'm curious. So do you see do you specialize in a certain demographic or do you just see everybody?
I specialize in trauma. So most of my clients have childhood trauma or, you know, events happening and they're working through that. Lately, the biggest piece of my caseload is young adults, older teens and young adults. Historically, I've seen kids and teens.
So how do you feel like giving birth during a pandemic and all the strangeness about it, you know, like going from I can have a team of people in there to support me to you can only have your partner. Some people give birth without their partner in the beginning.
Yeah.
You have to wear a mask when you give birth, like all these weird things. Like, do you feel like that has caused a lot of trauma for moms?
I think so. You know, I've seen a couple different ways that this has gone for moms. Some moms I've talked to have felt like the lockdown or the lack of socialization and the isolation that's happened reminded us of maternity leave and those early weeks. I can relate to this group because, you know, maternity leave or those early weeks, you're home, you're not doing anything, you're kind of isolated, you don't know what's going on, you're confused, you're stressed, you don't sleep. And then that kind of happened in the first, you know, few months of the lockdown and the pandemic. So a lot of people were really triggered in that way. New moms that I've talked to, some of them have said it feels like it was the best time to have a baby during the lockdown when we're already isolating, we're already shouldn't go anywhere, keeping our baby safe. But then a lot have said that adding the fear of COVID and the fear of everything onto the stresses of a new baby does amplify. It amplifies, you know, stress and the postpartum symptoms for sure.
I guess I can see how somebody could see it as a benefit because you don't have FOMO. You know, it's not like everybody you know is out having a good time and you're just stuck at home breastfeeding for 20 hours straight, it feels like. So I never thought about that, but that's a good point. I can see how somebody could see that as a benefit to birthing in a pandemic.
Yeah. And then the moms who are not brand new to the game, once we've gotten our routine down, feel like, you know, there's that time, I think it's around 3 months-ish for me where I was like, okay, I think I can do this. Then there's other phases where it's like, oh no, this is hard again. So those of us who had kind of gotten a routine down and had some support, it was a huge hit because now all of a sudden we don't have those same measures. We can't, you know, access the same things for self-care, and sometimes childcare was changed and our support system is now inaccessible. So I think that was a huge hit.
Yeah, I mean, I took the pandemic very seriously, as I'm sure you've noticed on my social media. But one thing that I never did is I never stopped seeing my mom. We don't live together, but she lives across the street, or I should say I live across the street from her because she's been in that house since I was a child.
I love that.
And I know it's the best thing ever. But a lot of people weren't seeing their family, you know, they were isolating from their family. We never stopped because she is my biggest support. She's the one that helps me with my kids. And I mean, we're just very close as it is. So she continued to come over. And honestly, had we decided it wasn't safe, I don't know where I would be mentally right now, because she is the one that supports me and helping me take care of my kids. So if people were isolating from those main supports, I could see how that would be incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. And I think in your case, you and your mom kind of made similar decisions in the pandemic. And so you're what we call a quarantine. So if she's being safe, you're being safe. It wasn't as big of a risk as if like your family was traveling to visit you or something like that. So it's fantastic that you still had that outlet. You know, and I kind of utilized daycare after we put the kids back in daycare. That was our, you know, our help, because we didn't have extra help because our family wasn't traveling, you know, to visit with us. And so I had to roll the dice and say daycare is probably our mental health is more important. And if we can mitigate as many risks as possible, like we have to take that risk right now, because it's becoming very difficult.
Yeah, risk first, benefit for sure. And I think that's kind of something that the school system didn't do correctly, or well, I should say, because my kids have been going to daycare since they never stopped. The daycare never closed because it's close to a hospital. A lot of us work in healthcare, so they remained open. And it did decrease a lot as far as how many kids were in each class. They had to close a bunch of classes because a lot of kids weren't going. But we, knock on wood, because we're still in the pandemic, but we have not gotten it. None of us in my household. My mom works in healthcare. She works at a clinic, and she hasn't. But like you said, we all take it very seriously. We wear a mask. We wash our hands. The daycare has been phenomenal at doing as much as they can with social distancing, you know, as far as the adults go. But my director and I were just discussing the pandemic, and he was saying, like, you can't control one demographic of people and not expect to control another. And he was talking about like childcare, and I'm like, you would literally have to assign a teacher to every 3-year-old and hold them down to social distance them. Like that's like impossible. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, they continued to go, and I had a little hesitancy about it. I had a little guilt about it, you know, like I felt like I was putting them in harm's way. You know, I'm risking their lives to go to work, but in order for them to have a roof over their head and food in their belly, they have to have a job. So it had to have been risk over benefit. But I feel like a lot of people were at such a crossroads that, like, what do I do here?
Right. And a lot of parents, especially who had a really good routine and a really good system set up, now have to make this decision, like this has to completely change. I think that throws people for a loop. And then I saw so many parents on social media like sharing that their kiddos are going to school and then justifying it. You know, and I felt so bad for those parents. It's like, you don't have to justify that decision. That's the best decision for your family. It's not a one size fits all. My husband and I had many conversations like, what do we do? Do one of us just really cut back from work and continue doing this at home? Or do we, you know, trust that this school is going to keep our kiddos safe? And, you know, with child development, especially my kids are 4 and 2, they need social, emotional care more than anything else. And we could not continue to give that to them at home while trying to work and all of that. So that was the decision we made. And I hope that parents felt like they could do that without judgment. That was hard to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I was a little bit guilty of some judgment in the beginning. And I think it all came from fear, you know, where I was just like, this is scary. We shouldn't be doing this. But then once the data started coming out about kids and transmission and how low it is, the risk, I'm like, okay, like I was wrong. And I think it's important to be able to say, like, I was wrong. And because we can make the wrong decision, right? And as long as we can acknowledge that, then that's okay. So I think now I'm just curious why the school system hasn't acknowledged that yet, because these kids, and I think another big mistake they made was, and I know it's because nobody knew what to do, right? But they pulled them and then they sent them back, and then they pulled them and then they sent them back. I feel like just pulling them and keeping them there until you were sure you were going to permanently send them back would have been more beneficial to their mental health than this back and forth, oh, yay, we get to go back to school. Oh, no, you don't. You're home again. Like, that must have rocked their world.
Yeah, I've been saying I wouldn't want to trade places with school administrators because I think that was probably, such a hard thing to try to make those decisions, talk to your teachers and have parents, chirping into. And so I would like to hope they made the best decision they feel like they could in a situation that we have no instruction manual for. But I've been saying this whole time, I've been so grateful that my kids are not of school age yet.
Yes, me too. I said that too. I'm like, thank God, because my kids are on November babies. And so Jasmine turned 5 in November, but she missed the cutoff to start kindergarten. Thank God.
Right.
Because I wouldn't want to be a parent having to deal with it right now, because I see everybody going through it and it's hard.
Yeah.
So how have the teens that you work with been handling the pandemic?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, some teens love going to school at home because they get to miss out on all the bullying and the social drama. And, they are traumatized anyway, so they want to be home. But some have a hard time changing their routine. And most parents can't really accommodate making sure their kid is attending school online while attending to their own, needs, or they're working from home while their kid's in like 7th grade. Can you imagine? So it's been a mixed bag, but I'd say most teens have done a lot better going back to in-person or some sort of hybrid model.
Okay. Yeah. I did online college and it didn't work for me. I did really poorly in online college versus when I would actually attend classes. So I can see how that would be difficult, but I'm an extrovert. So for me, I'm like, I need to be around people. Yeah. That was hard for me a little bit here because I was one of the few they didn't send to work from home. So I would be sitting at my desk working and all of a sudden the lights would go off because they're motion censored and nobody is walking because it's literally like 2 of us there. And so that was hard for me. I'm like, I felt like I was working in the apocalypse, like when we would run out of supplies because the supply person wasn't here and I'd be like scrounging through desks to try to find stuff. And I'm like, this is so weird.
Like literally surviving on breadcrumbs. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much. This was an awesome discussion. Do you have any last tips or advice that you would give to anybody who's having a struggle with mental health, a new mom, anybody like that?
Well, I think just talk, be open, share, ask for help. Don't be afraid. Don't compare yourself to what it looks like other families are doing during the pandemic because we're only seeing a snapshot. I also wanted to add too, it's not just moms, that struggle with postpartum or struggle with those early weeks and months. Dads can also have symptoms of postpartum, and men's mental health in general is very stigmatized. And so we need to normalize that men are human. They're going to have the same, the same concerns that anyone else would. And as an early dad, early parenthood, or even just a second partner, their life changes dramatically too. And oftentimes the dad or the non-birthing partner goes back to work very early and then has to manage learning this new child and going to work and taking care of mom. And so we also need to check in on dads.
Yes, that is so true. I recently uploaded an episode and it was a gentleman who experienced a stillbirth with his wife. And he mentioned that because he's like, people would come up to me and say, how's she doing? But nobody ever thought like, hey, I should check in on dad. Because I think what it is it's, if you can't see it, for some reason, we ignore it. And so mom carried the baby. We saw she was pregnant. We know she went through labor. And so that's just like in the forefront of your mind. But that is so true because their life is drastically changed too in so many ways. So that is true. That's very important.
Well, I appreciate this outlet to be able to talk about this stuff.
Yes. This is like the most random thing too that came to my mind. Sorry, I'll let you go right now. But
that's okay.
I recently started listening to Shawn Mendes' music. Do you know him? He talks a lot about being a male and having mental health issues and anxiety and how he feels like he can't, he's conditioned not to cry because he'll feel like less of a man.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that's really cool when somebody with such a big platform comes out and says like, "Hey, like I can be sad too. You know, I can be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable and emotional." And the thing is, I as a woman, and maybe this isn't a popular opinion, but I see that as a strength in a man. So I
Oh yeah.
find it odd that it's so stigmatized
Mm-hmm.
because
Well, toxic masculinity. Yeah.
yes, exactly. But that's a whole other topic. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really
Absolutely, my
appreciate it.
pleasure.
It was so nice to kind of see you. I mean, we're not in person,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, you take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. It was so nice to reconnect with Stacey. Her and I actually worked together previously at a detox facility. So we were kind of in that whole behavioral health world together, and it was so great that I was able to have this conversation with her, and I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope if you know somebody who you think might be struggling with some of these issues, you feel like you can share this with them so that they can hopefully get the help that they need, or even just open up and talk about it a little bit. So thank you guys. I hope to see you back again. So please do me a solid and subscribe so that you'll get notified when I post a new episode, because together is a beautiful place to be.